Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football. Today's show is presented by Geico. Switch to Geico, see all the ways that you could save. It is Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday of week 16, December 22nd. Field, Mike Clay, and myself. No Stephania today.
Double Dopp, Triple D.
That's right.
Yep.
We got a bunch of updates, Field. A little bit of breaking news. Heard that yesterday was the most downloaded show ever in the history of Fantasy Focus.
The most hearted, the most loved
It's
show?
like no one ever commented more on it. No one had more social impressions than what we did yesterday.
And all positive?
All positive.
Positive.
Yep.
What, is
So
something
this is like
different
when a new this is like when a new episode of or like when a new Frozen comes out, right?
That's
Like
what
everybody
it's like.
watches, right? It's
Okay.
like there's only been what 2 or 3 Frozen so
Two.
far. 2,
Come on,
but
man.
like
You should know this by now.
she's 11 months,
She's-
kid. Like I'm not quite
You
there.
got to start your research. You got to start working.
I could
you gotta know this
literally,
stuff.
You got a free watch.
I could
Yes.
put like I don't even know what I could put on like a black and white like silent film, and my daughter will be enthralled by it. So we're not quite to the level of
right.
Like a Jane Silent
Frozen.
Bob? Is that what you mean by a silent film?
Heyo, yeah.
So we have to do like Disney trivia now.
Right.
Because like in 5-10 years, you're going to be able to just crush me and all the new stuff. So we have to do it now.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm trying to think so thinking back to yesterday, you were here, right, Daniel?
Oh, I was here, yeah.
I was here.
Okay.
We talked about what kind of stuff, like lots of fun stuff. Were you here?
Okay. No, I wasn't here.
Oh.
I was at a Christmas concert for my daughter, and they crushed it.
This isn't awkward, is it?
Oh. No, I don't think so.
It's
No,
all right.
not at all.
It's just, I chose family, but, that's cool. Keep piling on.
I love
Keep
you.
piling on.
I love it.
You ever heard of Wally Pip, Mike?
Yeah, but who did I get Wally Pip by?
Nobody, and that's the
I
part
know.
that's even worse.
Empty chair. I've been replaced by empty chair.
The dulcet tones of the empty chair just Wally Pipped you.
Well, you know what's funny about that concert is the kids went up, there was the whole 3rd grade at Chapman School, and they did, 5 songs or so. And then they were like, okay, all the kids turn around and they put the lyrics to all the famous Christmas songs up on the screen, and they wanted the parents to sing, and they did like 9 consecutive songs.
9 songs?
Yeah, so they just kept us singing, and we
Let's
sang
go.
too. Yeah, it was just over and over. It was
Do you have enough left in your vocal
a
cords
little
to make
bit.
it through
I'm
today's
struggling
show?
a little. I'm going
Okay.
to try. If I just start singing though, like Jingle Bell Rock,
I played
it's
through a
just in my
sore
head.
neck yesterday. Did you listen to the show or no?
No.
Okay, got it. Nice to hear that you support the show. No big deal.
Nah,
But yeah,
nope.
I played through a sore neck yesterday. Thanks for asking how it's doing today. And you're playing through sore vocal cords. So
Yeah, that's how about you?
No, I'm good.
no, he's good. Tomorrow he'll be
100%.
heard.
Yeah, I'm 100%.
But again, like we are like some call us warriors, other call us gladiators. Some think of us as like
Iron
literal
Men.
and Titans and Iron Men. So
Yeah.
yeah, no big deal. But that's kind of what we do here at the
That's sort of what it is, Mike.
All right. Well, I'll try to bounce back today and take my job back from empty chair, and we'll see how it goes. I'm basically Zach Wilson, right? I'm trying to take my job back.
Oh man,
What a good full circle. All right, let's move ahead. We're going to talk about a Thursday night preview, and then we're going to preview a ton of games that we have on Saturday. Friday is going to be the same thing. We're just going to be doing more previews as we head into the Saturday games and the Sunday games and Monday Night Football. So
yeah.
And by the way, super important week because of the weather. We're going to talk about a lot of weather
so much
implications.
weather.
There's 3 games that
So-
stand out with major concerns. And I think we're going to talk
Honestly,
about all of them
maybe
today,
more.
actually.
Honestly, maybe more.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe more,
There's
because-
there's 3 that really stand out.
Yep, I agree.
There's others that we have to monitor.
Yeah,
for sure.
every game makes you a little bit nervous. We'll dive into the games that are specifically making us nervous. But let's just begin with the Jaguars and the Jets.
let's do it. Thursday night preview.
This is one of them.
All right, lineup locks for this game include Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Garrett Wilson.
And we need to talk about that.
Yeah, we will. Here,
because-
let's do the injuries, and then we'll do we'll go locks, injuries, weather, and go
Yes.
from there. How about that?
Right. My point is Kirk and Wilson.
Yeah,
maybe
we'll talk about
Ingram
them.
might not be, so we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, when
So
you hear us say
we'll-
lineup blocks, it's like assuming it's not like the worst conditions ever. So we'll discuss whether these are the worst conditions ever after. But injuries, I think it's important to note. Trevor Lawrence, questionable. He's going to play, obviously.
Yeah.
A lot of a night for the Jets is an ankle injury. Sounds like he's good to go. And then Corey Davis off the injury report for the Jets. He's expected to play on Thursday night. Might mean a diminished role for Elijah Moore. But now let's talk about the weather. Because at last check, and Mike and I and Daniel were looking at this like just before the show, according to Dark Sky, which I'm going to miss you so much when you are no longer in effect as of January 1st, 2023. It's going away. No fun. But I have MetLife Stadium pulled up, and one thing it won't be today is cold. The problem is everything else. It is going to be, well, I guess actually pretty cold still.
Above freezing. Which,
yes, it is.
Relatively speaking, it's a hot game for this week.
Yep. From basically 3 p.m. until 5 a.m. It is supposed to be pouring in New York. Precipitation rate at the start of the game is around 0.08 inches per hour. It gets up to 0.13 by about halftime. So it's going to be raining.
I have it projected at 1.2, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay, 0.12. It will be very fast for going. Yeah, that would be very, very fast. Wind is expected to be gusting at around 40 miles per hour per kickoff. So the wind itself will be about 16, but it'll be 40 miles per hour in terms of the wind gusts. Sounds like just absolutely the wrong conditions to be throwing the football tonight in a game in which we have one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So let's just ask it, like, does this impact the Jaguars pass catchers for you, or maybe even Trevor Lawrence?
Absolutely. Look, in assuming normal conditions, I have Lawrence at 11. You're at 12, Field. Daniel, you're at 10.
Yep.
So we're already looking at him as a borderline starter because of the matchup, right? The Jets have allowed the fourth fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks, right? So we're already downgrading him for that. And now you're telling me he might not be able to throw the ball. I mean, he might drop back to pass, and the wind might be so heavy that he has to pull it down, or they just keep running and running and running. We've seen games like this before, and it can be a disaster for passing games. So I have major concerns. I would not want to count on Lawrence as of now unless the weather drastically changes, which it's not going to, right? Yeah. I mean, the forecast is just overwhelming. Downgrading him, I don't want to start him. He's probably more of a back-end QB2 at this point, which we'll adjust, obviously, on the fly today. Kirk, usually a lineup block.
No longer.
Zay Jones, top 20 receiver this season after his big game. I wouldn't feel great starting them. I wouldn't. They're maybe flex options, but you could probably do better.
Let me ask you this, Daniel, see if you're cool with this plan. So when weather is impactful, I don't always love to just say, like, well, in my team, I'm doing this, because it's usually pretty nuanced, and what is happening in my league may be very different than what's happening in leagues on average. But this actually might be a fairly relevant show, that if we are in a matchup where we have one of these players, we can walk through some of the options that we are considering on our own. Because you were just talking about, like, you do have Trevor Lawrence in the Dynasty League. What is the dilemma you're facing, and who are you or what are the other options you have, and where's your mindset as of 10:05 Eastern time?
My other best option is Russell Wilson, a quarterback who was supposed to be my quarterback for the season this year. That didn't go well. But, I'm going to have to go that direction. Like, I don't want to. I feel like there's no ceiling there, obviously, but there's a real concern that Lawrence attempts 9 passes in this game, So I don't think I can start him. I don't think I can. I'm going to start Wilson.
Mine is Dak Prescott. I drafted Dak Prescott to be my starter, or Trevor Lawrence.
Oh, well,
so, and right now you're even in a bad matchup, you're saying I'm going Dak. Yeah. And then on my front, like, I have a league with Zay Jones as a wide receiver, and I'm going to pivot to DJ Moore as of right now, which I know it's a good matchup and still, so it's a good
you guys are like sitting in the good life here.
No. But, like, it's not like DJ Moore's been lighting the world. He's not the reason why I made it to the playoffs, I'll tell you that much, right?
I think this is really interesting, Field, because what you're saying is, I look at Trevor Lawrence. He was a top 5 quarterback in 3 of the last 4 weeks, and Zay Jones was a top 5 or top 10.
3 touchdowns last week.
Wide receiver in 4 of the last 5 weeks. This is like the perfect scenario of, this is not don't get cute. This is there are things happening in this game that you just will not be able to forecast, and it's a different kind of setup. Because to talk about benching guys leading into the playoffs that have done that for your roster is a huge thing to do. But what are you going to do about it?
And also, not to be overlooked, and I think it's probably understood, the Jets defense is nasty.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Really
so, like, even if it was perfect conditions out there, you'd be lowering your expectations for all Jaguars players. Mike wrote about the Jaguars wide receivers being downgraded a bit because of the matchup and wide receiver cornerback matchup. So I do think there's a chance that this is a lower scoring game, even if, like, it turns out we've got rainbows and sunshine at the time the kickoff takes place, which certainly won't happen. But it makes me nervous, man. And it's the trickiest week because it's not like this is an isolated situation where this is the only bad weather game. Like, you may be like, yeah, well, my other quarterback is Deshaun Watson. And it's like, okay, well, you want to play with 50-mile-an-hour winds on Saturday in Cleveland? Like, no, you might have to take the lesser of the two evils weather-wise. So it's a tough one here. But yes, expect to put a pin in it all. Like, expectations are certainly downgraded for Trevor Lawrence and all the pass catchers in Jacksonville that we have been starting, and Garrett Wilson as well.
And Garrett Wilson. I'm going to assume, Mike, not just in this game across the board, but we'll focus here, that we're just going to see fewer pass attempts this week, increased running game. And so with that slight boost in running back value potentially? Do you see Bam Knight or Travis Etienne? Are they, in the same spots that they would be here?
Yeah, we've seen Jacksonville kind of commit to Etienne as a runner, right? We thought it would be more of a like Kamara workload where it was like maybe half the carries and substantial number of targets. Hasn't really had, if they need to give him 25 carries, they've done that, right? Yeah. So I think you'll see them just call more runs. It's going to be good for Etienne. You're still feeling fine about him. And then as for the Jets, I mean, Bam Knight was outsnapped by Michael Carter last week, and a lot of that was in passing situations where he just clearly blew him away in terms of pass routes and targets. This week, could be, again, a 25-carry game for Bam Knight, so I feel better about him. So Knight can be started. Etienne, obviously, you're starting. That's all you feel good about. I don't know who else you would really feel good. Garrett Wilson, we're going to downgrade along with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. I mean,
yeah, no, I think it's important to also mention, like, I think it's, in this case, it actually is worth mentioning, like, the personal tie, because if Trevor Lawrence somehow throws for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns tonight, and you're out there on Twitter and you're thinking about like clapping back at us, like, just know that it's impacting us as well here, right? Like, we are putting our money where our mouth is and making our lineup adjustments as well. Unless, again, Jim Cantori pops up on our screen later and is like, hey, good news. Like, we've got, 70-degree weather coming to East Rutherford, New Jersey tonight, which won't be happening.
And keep an eye on it up until the game. If the wind forecast, that's a big one. The wind's always big for me. And look, we don't talk about weather on the show a lot because we don't overreact to this stuff. A lot of time you're just like, oh, it's going to rain or snow. And people are like, should I not start? And we get questions like that all the time. Normally it's like, no, unless there's heavy winds, we're not worried about it. But if it's pouring down rain like this and it's wind gusts of 40 miles an hour, you have to be ready for that. And I think the best example of this is the Bills game, Bills Patriots last year. Yeah. Where, what was it? The Patriots called like
three passes.
They called 3 passes. Now, won't be that extreme most likely in this game, but it could be if the weather is really horrific.
We are in a national weather crisis right now. I've been getting a million different alerts. It's the coldest Christmas in at least 40 years across the country. Like Colorado, which is where my in-laws are, like, they live, like, it's negative 30 degrees right now in Denver. Negative 30. Like, even if it's not windy, which, by the way, when it gets to negative 30, that's because there is some wind. But even if it's not super windy, like, it's just miserable to play in that kind of weather. So you should expect that this looks like a different weekend than I think other weekends have traditionally in the NFL.
And the teams know this tonight, right? Like, they're planning right now they're adjusting their game plan to run the ball as much as they possibly can and win that way.
And by the way, the 37.5 over-under kind of reflects it as well. It's a low total, not the lowest of the week, but it's a lower total than you would expect with a team that includes Trevor Lawrence under center.
Who are you taking in this game, Field Yates?
I tell you what, I am reluctant to have to make a pick. I will go with the Jets because I think defense wins here.
Yeah.
I will go Jets 2017.
Wow, that's a lot of points.
I know. Well, 37.5 is the over-under.
Yeah,
so
I had it. I mean, I had it 20-20. That was assuming normal conditions. So it was basically a washout.
You could see
I would lean
defensive.
Jacksonville because they're playing so well, but now it might be 10-10. 10-9. 10-9 Jags.
Jaguars 10-9.
I'm taking them.
I'm thinking a defensive touchdown or something sloppy.
The Jags have the division in their grasp. I mean, the Titans probably without Tannehill for the rest of the season. They're one game ahead. They play in week 18. This is a huge game for them if they can win.
And by the way, you know who Tennessee plays next week?
Who's next week?
Somebody. I think it's somebody good, though. I'm pretty sure it's like not a cakewalk team.
And they might lose this week, the way Houston's been playing the last 2 weeks. I mean, we'll see.
I'm going to take the Jets.
Okay, nice call.
Right.
10-3.
All right.
God, the Jets have already won one game. Have already lost a game 10-3 this season, so I guess it is possible.
Here's a question, though. Kickers in this game. You can't play kickers if you got to go through all these games too and see who your kicker.
Yeah, again,
what the matchups look like.
3 games with major win concerns for me, and we're going to talk about. I think this one is one.
We don't usually.
I've already added the kicker. I'm just saying,
I've
added the kicker in all leagues that plays either indoors or in Florida this weekend.
Yeah,
that's been my decision.
Definitely keep an eye on that. By the way, the other games which we'll get to, it's the Bears and the Bills, and the Browns and the who are they playing?
Browns and the Ravens, Saints.
Yep, and the Saints. Right. So those are the ones with the highest concerns right now.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff, Daniel.
Next up, let's talk Falcons at Ravens. Lineup locks for this game include reluctantly starting Mark Andrews.
Yep, reluctantly is the keyword.
Reluctantly is the keyword, and honestly, that is the only lineup lock for this game. There is nobody else here that you can feel confident in, and you don't even really feel that confident in Mark Andrews. We had a ton of questions in chat. Kyle Soppe let us know that chat has been blowing up with managers that have Mark Andrews saying, do I have to start him here in the playoffs?
I just don't know where you turn instead.
That's right.
Like, if you had added like an Evan Ingram recently off of waivers, like I could understand that decision. I still wouldn't necessarily feel totally at ease given the weather we just talked about in New York, right? But I don't know how I don't know who it would be. That's the big question mark for me. So he's ranked number 2 in my tight end ranking. How's that?
And he keeps going down. Like he keeps
The
like his
projection,
projection
yes.
keeps dropping every week. But he was still so far. It's like Kelsey's way up at the roof, and then Andrew's kind of in the middle, and everyone else is like down here. And Andrew's is coming closer to these other guys like Hawkinson's, I think 1 point behind him in the projections, but he's still there. And the reason is his target share is still pretty good. He has 6 or more targets in 5 straight games since they're bye. No Lamar Hurts for sure, but again, it's just he's too good, and he could score 2 touchdowns at any given point.
It just
most guys can't do.
It just feels like, and this could be famous last words, it feels like there was a time at the beginning of the season or coming into the season where you would have thought that Mark Andrews would be the best player on your team in the playoffs. And instead he is a player that you are playing because you have to, not because you want to. But I really don't know how many other tight ends were like reasonably added off the waiver wire where you could say to yourself, like, yeah, I'm playing that guy over Mark Andrews. Like, even if you played in a league where Darren Waller had been dropped because he was on IR for so long, or Juwan Johnson, like, that's fine. But there was a game 2 weeks ago where Juwan Johnson had 0 catches.
That was 2 weeks ago. He had this big game the week before. He had 2 targets, 0 catches.
0 for 0. So, And I think it's also really important to note, we don't know who's playing quarterback on Saturday for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson's still not practicing, certainly showing the potential of him to not play at all. And then Tyler Huntley's been added to the injury report. Keep in mind that the Ravens have Anthony Brown as the next man up. He was a guy you guys know, maybe know. I'm a Boston College football fan. Had our
ups and downs,
struggles, more downs than ups, unfortunately. But Anthony Brown, like, this was a guy who like wasn't even like great at Boston College. Like, I wanted him to be great. And now he's going to potentially be an NFL starting quarterback on Saturday. That should make you a bit nervous for Mark Andrews and every Ravens pass catcher in a matchup that I don't know that it scares you. It's also going to be very cold there, like bitterly cold, not like super rainy or super windy, but still, it's going to be a miserable day outside. This could be a lot. It could be a lot of games where it's just ground and pound.
Yeah, is this going to be one of those J.K. Dobbins type games, Mike?
Been back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, it might be. He's been good. 14 or more touches, 120 plus yards, and 13 plus fantasy points in both games.
Yeah,
he's coming back from
fresh
injury.
legs really help, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And we know what a great athlete he is. He just keeps getting faster every week. And I think he tweeted about that, right? That his speed's still coming back, and he's going to get to that point with the long runs. But the red flag here is what the red flag always is with Ravens running backs. He has 1 target in his last 4 games. He's just not used in that department. So that's going to limit his ceiling. That's why despite 2 good games on the ground, we still have him ranked outside our top 20. They're going to run it a lot, but he's still probably going to play 45% of the snaps, and Gus Edwards will get some run, and Justice Hill a little bit. So, again, limited ceiling, but he's a borderline RB2.
It's frustrating because it's like back-to-back weeks. Like if I just told you the snap count, you'd be like, I don't know if I'm really playing that guy. But he is running his tail off right now.
Maybe like 8 yards per carry or something?
And maybe it's because he is, healthy and fresher than the rest of the league right now because he didn't play for a big chunk of the early portion of this season. Maybe it's just because he's so talented, which is definitely the case. But he has, 1 catch, as you said? Like one catch, one target over 2 games. So there are some warning signs here that, like, if the Falcons buck up on run defense, it could be a lower day for J.K. Dobbins.
None of us are starting any Atlanta Falcons, but Desmond Ridder did start for them last week. I'm just curious if you thought this team looked any better with Ridder under, or did they look at least like the same Falcons? Did they take a step back?
There was only one good thing that I liked.
Yes, I know.
12 targets for Drake London.
Yes, exactly. 2 weeks in a row now. He's had, he had 11 the week before, right? So that's good. But at least they're like finally like, we took this guy in the top 10.
We should
feed him the ball often as we possibly can. Keep that going.
The only thing that I would just say that, like, I was happy about the 12 targets for Drake London. I also, even if he's imperfect, I think I kind of understand why Marcus Mariota was playing all his time, right? Like, rough day for Desmond Ridder. Probably nowhere to go but up. And up could include to the NFC South champion level because they're still very much in the mix for this division. But I would prefer not to play any Falcon on Saturday.
If you had to start one of these running backs, we watched Tyler Algier crush it last week. Are you taking him or are you taking Cordero Patterson in this run heavy?
I'm going to go Patterson. He did have 15 touches and a touchdown last week, which is a point in the right direction. He hasn't had 12.5 fantasy points in a game in 5 straight. So that's a little bit of a concern and why you want to avoid a backfield using 3 guys. I know Caleb Huntley's out for the season now, but he was barely playing. It was kind of weaned down to 3 guys. As for Algier, I'll say this. Look, coming off a huge game, it's going to be tempting to start him after he had 139 yards and a touchdown in that game. But in the 4 games prior, and again, he was playing the same role. Snap share-wise, it was pretty much the same. The 4 games prior, he was in the 9 to 11 touch range and under 8 fantasy points in all of them. much like Dobbins, 2 targets in his last 4 games. And by the way, he does most of his damage on the ground. Ravens 3.8 yards per carry. That is, to running backs, that's 5th lowest, right? So they're very good against the run. That's his role. He had a spike game. That's fine, but he hasn't been very good.
But so it's more of a spike game than a...
I need more than this.
Yeah.
I need more big games before I'm starting Tyler Algier.
All right, that's fair. Let's move ahead. Talk Lions at Panthers.
Just to interrupt, we're going to preview it tomorrow in full, but just moments ago, Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni did say he does not expect Jalen Hurts to play on Saturday, which is where the things were trending. There was a column that went up yesterday from Dan Graziano and Jeremy Fowler, and Graz floated the possibility he doesn't play for 2 straight weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is a multi-week injury for Jalen Hurts, not guaranteeing it, but it's going to be at least 1 week. And the sad trombone you hear in the background of this podcast is all those fantasy lineups that had Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, Minshew. We're going to
a lot of
people starting him over Watson and now Lawrence and guys like that.
Yeah,
this
I would
week,
be.
no doubt. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Weather not an issue. Good player, good offensive line, great pass catchers.
By the way, Tuesday we did a deep dive on that too.
Yeah,
we're going to talk through Minshew and the Hurts impact on that offense. Tuesday show.
Okay. Lions at Panthers here. Lineup blocks for this one. We've had some surprisingly sparingly sparse. What's the
Sparse.
Yeah, but this is the weather impact, right?
Amon-Ra St. Brown is
part
the
of it,
only one that is here. The Panthers, you're not starting anyone from the Panthers, and for the Lions, you're talking about the other running backs. I mean, what is it that you're doing between these two guys? So let's start there with DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, and have things changed at all again from what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
You know what? I have grown very accustomed to over the years listening to Mike Clay's advice very, very, very closely and trying to not disagree with him unless I feel very strongly about it. Sure. And I don't know that 8 spots difference is a massive disagreement.
Oh, wow.
But
yeah.
DeAndre Swift and I'm on the outs here. Yeah. Like I'm at running back 24 because I just don't know what I can predict from this player. So having him as, a top 15 or 16 play, which I think would imply borderline lineup block, just didn't feel right to me. So I moved him down to RB 24 in this matchup, which it's not that I'm scared of the matchup necessarily. I just don't have any idea whether he's going to play 25 snaps or every single snap for the Lions on Sunday.
Yeah,
Saturday,
he's been 6 straight games. He's been in the 31 to 38% snap share range, right? So he's that's not a big number at all, but he had 8 carries and 9 targets last week, and 2 of his last 3 games were really good. 75 or more yards and 12.5 fantasy points in 2 of the 3. Not a huge number by any means, but for me, it's enough in this matchup, a pretty good matchup. Carolina hasn't been great against running backs, and 9 targets last week. I mean, in PPR, it's enough to make him a mid-range RB2 for me. So, I got burned by him bad in DFS a couple weeks ago. It stings a little bit, but, he's such a good player. Great offensive line in front of him. Huge passing game usage. It's enough for me that I'm okay starting him.
I have him as running back 19. He's a low-end RB2, high-end flex play for us this week, in part because, again, with all the weather games this week, if there's anything, and I don't know, maybe there's not going to be any wind here in Carolina, but...
Cold. Very cold. Coldest game in Carolina Panthers home history. So I'm sorry to be a broken record, but every stadium it applies. Every single stadium it applies.
Jamal Williams is outside of the top 30 at running backs for us, and it feels hard to be able to trust starting him at this point, in spite of everything that was awesome that he helped to get you here.
Say the stat.
Under 12 fantasy points, 6 of his last 7 games, and that's with all them touchdowns. Think about he was 14 touchdowns this year.
15.
He gets the 6 points for the touchdown, and that's like it. He gets a few more points. He just can't really get to double digits a lot.
Less so this year than I think previous years, but there have been years in the past where you're like, that guy's great in non-PPR. I'm not sure Jamal Williams is great, but he definitely is much better in non-PPR than he is in PPR because he hasn't caught a pass since week 8. That's hilarious, though.
That's the way that
he's awesome.
He's awesome.
That's the way that we look at these Panthers running backs, too, though. Like, Deonta Foreman is not catching passes at all. Chuba Hubbard is the only one that is sort of catching passes.
He doesn't catch passes at all, Deontay Foreman. And he had 10 carries for 9 yards last week. 10 for 9.
It's rough. I don't want to use either guy because we talk about vaunted run defenses in the NFL right now. It's the 49ers, and it's the Detroit Lions who you cannot do anything against them. Check this out. They haven't allowed, I'm kind of picking up where you left off.
Yeah.
The past few weeks, Lions have not allowed a running back to score 10 fantasy points since week 7.
That's crazy, right?
No double-digit performances from a running back against him since week 7.
Yeah, and it's nuts.
And it's not a bunch of scrubs either.
No, it's not at all. And the last team to do it was actually the Cowboys. Both running backs got there. Zeke and Pollard since then, just shutting it down. Fewest running back fantasy points allowed over the last 8 weeks. I don't want either guy. I mean, it's a committee. And it's actually 3 guys because Raheem Blackshear's playing as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
I do not want to touch any of these guys.
Daniel, how many Pro Bowlers did the Lions get? Just one?
Oh.
Frank Ragnow? Is it just one?
I think it was just Frank Ragnow. Taylor Decker, I think, is a 5th alternate. He didn't seem to be pleased about that.
Yeah, pretty ridiculous.
Would the Eagles have 8 and 9 alternates?
Wow.
Literally, yeah.
Like 9
I'm not a
alternates?
big like Pro Bowl snubs guy in general, but there were a couple that like I would have liked to see get that nod. I thought that Sun guy probably would be
Amon-Ra St. Brown should have been
close to
in
the
that
top
yeah.
of players
What?
that I think deserves to be a Pro Bowl wide
That's
receiver.
tough.
You know, they're obviously Justin Jefferson's going to make it,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
there are some really excellent AJ Brown's an excellent
course.
receiver. Like there are some awesome players that are very much deserving. Christian McCaffrey probably at the top of the list though in terms of snubs for the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, that one's tough. That one's
Austin
really
Eckler
tough.
still hasn't made the Pro Bowl either. Which you know, it's like Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. Who are you taking off? I think I would make a case for Eckler over Nick Chubb this year.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Chubb has kind of tapered off of late. But this is part of the reason why I don't love the Pro Bowl snub debate is that like you have to take somebody off.
Yes.
That
And
hurts.
he's
And
the
you don't
best
want
of
to
the
do
best.
that. Yeah, if someone
Yeah.
made it, they deserve it, but
Well,
you
I
could make
saw-
the case someone deserved it a little more, but
Yeah.
it's still.
It seems like the most divisive pick so far has been TJ Watt, who's like an incredible player, right? But he's only played 7 games, has 4 sacks. So people are like bummed out there that other players didn't get that nod.
Yeah.
But my general rule of thumb is like when it comes to debating the awesomeness of TJ Watt, I don't ever bet. He's just so
You don't
good
go bet
that
against it.
he could play one game and I'd be like, yeah, defensive player of the year candidate, as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah,
right?
it's that conversation or the debate. Like, do you want the best players there, or do you want the best? Is it just based on production this season, right? And you can, I guess it's a mix of both.
Good spot here for DJ Moore, Mike, to remind the masses, right? Really
Oh
good spot.
yeah, Lions can stop the run; they cannot stop the
Yeah, I was
pass,
gonna
as
say,
you
we do
know
one
well.
thing well, we do not do the other.
Yes, 3rd most fantasy points to receivers, most over the last month. You know, they're still trying to figure out that personnel. They've kind of settled in a little with Okuda and Jacobs and Will Harris in the slot, but it's just not something they can do, and teams don't want to run against them anymore. So,
Yeah.
good matchup for Moore. And by the way, 2 of 3 games with Sam Darnold, 18 plus fantasy points. So he's trending up. You know, you have him in your
Signs
lineup. You're
of
feeling
life.
good
Let's go.
about him
Lions
right
have
now.
Certainly given up at least 16 fantasy points to like 8 straight teams where like the wide receiver one has at least hit that mark.
Okay. Feel better
so-
about that one?
Yeah.
Seahawks at Chiefs. Update here. Seahawks at Chiefs. Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Patrick Mahomes, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Travis Kelce. But
That's probably what it is that like a lot of the good players this week are saturated.
Are
Like
all
you've got 2
within these
opponents
games.
going back and forth at each other.
we
Yeah,
have
there's
some
one-
injury
there's-
updates though here.
We do,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say there's one game that has no lineup locks this week. A little foreshadowing.
Really? Oh, that's gonna be fun.
Not ideal. But this game has plenty of them, Daniel, and that does not include one player who's not going to play. That is Tyler Lockett. Stephania passes along. There is a chance he could play in week 17 after having surgery on that finger. So don't rule him out yet for week 17. They play the Jets. Won't be a great matchup, but still, obviously a very, very good player. And then I have my eyes on Kenneth Walker III.
Yeah.
Back-to-back days with missed practice because of that ankle injury. And I should have done this beforehand, but Pete Carroll had some interesting comments at the beginning of the week that didn't necessarily make you think that he is absolutely going to play. They're just going to manage him throughout the week. In the event that Kenneth Walker III does not play, I don't know that I can trust any Seahawks running back. The counterpoint that I'm going to make, though, for Kenneth Walker is they did release Tony Jones yesterday. So they waived Tony Jones, so one less player in the backfield. My thought, though, Mike, is that maybe they just feel like, hey, like we have Kenneth Walker. If we don't have him available, we'll go DJ Dallas and we'll go Travis Homer. And do they have Wayne Gallman? I think they might have released him from
I'm
the
not sure,
practice
but they
squad,
could
too.
still. I mean, Tony Jones could go to the practice squad and still get activated.
That's
so,
true.
I mean,
You could easily
they
have him
could
back.
certainly bring him back.
Isn't
but
Marshawn
yeah.
Lynch just like all-time running back
Definitely,
there?
it's hanging out.
Oh,
You know
yes.
what I
of
mean?
course.
Like he's just...
But let's keep an eye on that Kenneth Walker injury just in case. It sounds like there's at least a chance he will be out, but we'll find out more later on today. That's the good news. You have, obviously, today. You should get the normal Friday injury report on a Thursday.
So with that being said, can I ask quickly about the Seahawks? We basically listed everybody that you want to start then. There are no Seahawks left unless you want to throw a dart throw, I guess, at one of these other pass catchers with Tyler
Noah
Lockett out.
Fant, who's obviously banged up right now, has been a little busier of late, but he's part of that tight end conundrum that we always speak about. And then Marquise Goodwin's kind of interesting, Mike, if you're in a deep league.
Yeah, no more than 6 targets in a game since week 11 of last season. That was my criticism of him earlier this year when there was some question marks with like Metcalf's injury. But it's a great matchup. They're going to have to throw it a lot against the Chiefs. They've allowed the most touchdowns and the 4th most fantasy points to receivers this season. So there's, to your point, some deep league appeal. I have them 45th in my ranking. So we're talking 12-team league flexes if you're in a rough spot. But with Tyler Lockett out, I mean, that is a big target share. And I do think that they will move some of that to the tight end. So Noah Fant is a borderline tight end one. And if you're like, you know what, I am not messing with Evan Ingram, in this
Because of the
weather or something
like that.
That's an option.
he
And Will
plays-
Disley too. Will Disley too. He's a great DFS value if he goes. You're exactly right.
No knee injury, back-to-back missed practices. For
and if
him
he's out,
as
Will
well.
Disley could see
And
6 or
Disley
7
could see-
targets.
yep,
So
very
there's
busy man.
just
Yeah.
keep an eye on that.
Somebody besides DK Metcalf will have a day for the Seahawks on Saturday.
Hopefully,
by the
DK
way,
Metcalf also has a day. Though.
yeah, I'm saying on top of DK Metcalf
all right,
for alongside. It's supposed to be minus 10 degrees there. It's going to be freaking miserable. It's the driest, coldest cold you'll ever see. But got to play the game and should not be too windy or wet.
How about this super sleeper? You know, their number 3 receiver, I think, will be in this game.
Freddie Swain?
No, I mean they have Penny Hart. They
Penny
have
Hart's, I'm
Derek,
sorry,
they
yeah.
have
Freddie
Derek
Swain's
Swain's
now
on
with the
another team
Dolphins.
now.
Yeah,
But
Dolphins,
Laquan
yeah.
Treadwell.
That's right. Got on the
Yeah, I
53
would
man
not be
roster.
surprised
Yeah.
if he's third in line for
God.
them.
Oh my God, that would be crazy.
And
right?
remember him last year,
Yeah.
the last month or so of the season with Atlanta. He was really good.
Yeah, he was
finished
super solid.
Yeah, he
last
was.
year with Jacksonville.
or Jacksonville. Excuse
Yeah,
me. Right.
yeah.
He was in Atlanta. He bounced around.
He's
a
well
little bit.
traveled. Is Laquan Treadwell?
Yeah. So he'll be involved.
You did not hear us say Kenneth Jarek McKinnon in lineup blocks. There's probably a reasonable case though for Jarek McKinnon, who has just been awesome over the past 2 weeks. Over the past 3 weeks, he's been good, but over the past 2 weeks, he is the highest scoring player in fantasy. RB1 and then RB1 back-to-back finishes for Jarek McKinnon. And the secret sauce is that obviously he's an amazing pass catcher and they're super efficient targets, right? It's like 15 catches on 17 targets. Basically every ball that gets thrown his way is going to be caught. He's good after the catch. He's getting a bit more rushing upside as well, or a bit more rushing opportunities. I think the concern for Jarek McKinnon would be that your expectations are too high because he's been the highest scoring running back in back-to-back weeks.
Yeah.
And if you get to 12 fantasy points on Saturday, that's a reasonable total for Jarek McKinnon, even if it doesn't feel that way. And then 2 is that there haven't been Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney's hardly played, Mike. So how much does that impact the value here of Jarek McKinnon?
Yeah, and we expect Hardman back, and Kadarius Toney barely played last week. His role could increase here, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Right?
But yeah, 8+ targets is 4 of his last 7 for Jarek McKinnon. I think the largest concern here is that, I mean, first of all, remember, one of his biggest moments the last 2 weeks was that crazy play by Mahomes, where it was a 60-some yard touchdown on a little flip, right? So, and also before the 2 games, I think 12 was his highest fantasy output of the season, right? So he just kind of has spiked out of nowhere after playing this kind of modest role throughout the season. It is a good matchup. Seahawks second most yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points to running backs this season, so we do have him inside our top 20, but also expecting elite high-end production from a running back who's in a committee with a guy, Isaiah Pacheco, of course. He has 15+ touches in 6 straight games. He's not going away. He's going to continue to play a big role. So I think there is a chance of a major return to earth for McKinnon here, but with the matchup and how well he's played, he's at least a top 20 play.
And that's the thing. A major return to earth doesn't mean you can't play him. It just means don't expect 32 fantasy points this week. No. But the idea of 12 or 15 is still going to be plenty for your fantasy roster, something to be able to look at. So both Isaiah Pacheco and Jarek McKinnon are potentially usable here this week.
I would stick with Pacheco. Like I said, 15+ touches in 6 straight, 82+ yards in all of those games.
Seahawks run defense. Yeesh.
Yeah, he's not getting much in the passing game, only 7 targets during those 6 games, which limits his upside a little. That's really why McKinnon has exploded the last couple of weeks. But there's enough there against this defense for both of these guys to finish as top 25 running back.
Yep.
Mike, there's only one wide receiver that we are trusting on a consistent basis here, and that's Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster makes the shadow report this week.
He does, and it's a tough matchup. Seahawks, 3rd fewest fantasy points to receivers overall and to the perimeter. He's in the slot a lot. They've had the 2nd fewest to the slot over the last 2 months. So it is a tough matchup, but Juju Smith-Schuster has his last 2 games caught 10 of 10 targets for 88 yards and caught 9 of 11 targets for 74 yards and a touchdown. Yeah. He was limited the 3 weeks prior, right? He had that injury. I think it was a concussion, and then they limited him. Before that, he was doing this too. I mean, he had, I would say his last 6 full games, he's given you good wide receiver 1 production. So even in a tough matchup, you're starting him.
Got a bunch of money he can make via incentives. He's about to make all of it with how he's played.
It's your time of the year, right? This is when you start tweeting out all the incentives. You ready?
You've been paying attention. Oh, yeah.
I've seen.
I got my document ready. Don't you?
You're ready to go? All right.
I have a quick question that has nothing to do with fantasy.
Please.
7th round draft pick, Isaiah Pacheco. How, when you get signed as a 7th rounder, how long is your contract?
4 years. All drafted
deals
rookies
outside of that first round.
First round is 4 years with a 5th year team option. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So Pacheco,
Undrafted,
very
3
valuable
years.
player. Yeah. Undrafted is indeed 3 years. Yes, great call.
All right. Let's talk
You
next
go to
game.
restricted free agency as an undrafted free agent. So
That's an
basically
off-season
4 years of
cover.
team control.
I was going to say that, but I was like, that's an off-season topic.
So
So
let's just dive into all the contract minutia. For the
I just like when a
fantasy.
7th round rookie comes on, like Isaiah Pacheco is doing so well for himself and everything, and like he if he plays here towards the end of this season, think about how he can set himself up to be like a legitimate part of this Chiefs running game for next year.
Totally. Already is, right?
Which would be amazing as a fantasy for us in fantasy. I think that's awesome. So, all right, let's talk about Saints at the Browns. Lineup blocks for this one include Alvin Kamara and Nick Chubb field. But what are the updates that we have on Nick Chubb? He missed practice yesterday.
Yep, missed practice for the second straight day. Again, the team continues to say hopeful on Nick Chubb. If he does not play, then you can just sub Nick Chubb out of the lineup blocks and put in Kareem Hunt instead. He'll be a very busy man for the Cleveland Browns, and this might be the most severe weather of the entire weekend. Mike has already mentioned it, but it's going to be cold as all get out. It's going to be extremely windy. The lake effect winds in Cleveland are no joke. It's going to be wet, cold, miserable, windy, you name it. Not ideal whatsoever. For the Saints, Chris Olave missed his second straight day of practice because of a hamstring injury that popped up last week. Not ideal. So there's a possibility they won't have him. That being said, it's not like it's a game where we expect him to throw the football a whole bunch at all. Let's dive into the lineup blocks, though, because I want to say that Alvin Kamara obviously has been extremely frustrating and disappointing. If there were ever a matchup where if the Saints committed to the run and they could take advantage of it, this is it. I mean, the Browns have just been a really, really poor run defense throughout the season. So if you've been sitting there and saying to yourself, wait, Alvin Kamara, who has only scored in 1 week of this season, I really should be lineup blocking him. Maybe this is the week in which he gets unlocked because of that matchup against the Browns. The Saints did place a starting guard, Cesar Ruiz, on IR this week, which is not ideal, but they've actually been able to sort of figure it out along the offensive line for the most part over the years.
Is this one of those games where when we look at this outside of the running backs, because of the weather that could be happening here, we're trying to find ways to not start anyone else in these offenses?
Absolutely. Yeah. And my the two games I've adjusted so far in the projections and my ranks on the site are this one, and as I mentioned before, the Bills game. When I get home, I'll adjust the Jacksonville game now that we have more clarity on the weather for tonight. So it's already factored in. And like Chris Olave, at times we're ranking him like top 15. I mean, he's 33rd in my rankings. Yep. I mean, you almost don't want him to play, so you have an excuse to make sure you're not.
You don't even have to think about it. Yeah.
And he's not fully healthy. I would be trying to avoid Olave. Amari Cooper falls all the way down to 27 in my rankings. Don't feel great about it, but I mean, he sees such a high target share. You could justify it. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's been awesome. Not ranked by me. He's outside my top 50. I'm not starting him. David Njoku down to 9. Often a lineup block. This week, not so much. If you have a similar option, most weeks you're probably going that direction because of these conditions. So again, like Cooper, I'd say like Cooper and Njoku. Initially, I had as lineup blocks and I scratched them because of the weather.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, in that league that I was talking about earlier, you guys busted my chops where I have Zay Jones. I also have Amari Cooper, so that's part of the problem too. Is that like I could be down 2 wide receivers because
how do you
of
make
weather
that
this
decision?
weekend.
Yeah, like what if you choose?
Yeah, I
between
moved
those
both of them out.
Okay.
Remember, his team is stacked top to bottom.
That's right. That is true.
He's like, I have to start Juju and Hopkins, and
I'm playing Justin Jefferson instead.
Yeah,
So
Chris Godwin.
No, actually, the funny part is I actually am playing. It's Chris Godwin, Juju, and DJ Moore now.
That's funny. That's a great wide receiving core.
Well,
field.
it's a league that we're in together, Daniel.
Well,
it's a keeper league. So this is Gasco, where it's keeper. So like there were teams that were not as likely to make the playoffs, so we're incentivized to grab good contracts and trade away more bloated contracts for players that were closer to the expiration. So I did not like just knock my draft out of the park with like 8 great wide receivers. Like
he's starting Davis Mills at quarterback.
That's what it is.
His tight end is Jeff Swaim as his tight end. Yes.
Yeah,
Davis Mills is my backup quarterback.
That's hilarious. Pierre Strong. And, all right. So, honestly, there's no one else to talk about. We don't want to start anyone other than the running backs within this game. If you can help it. Mike, great input, though, on the wide receivers. Amari Cooper, really the only one that you're sort of looking at as a low-end flex.
Yeah. That's on the Brown side. And by the way, Deshaun Watson down to 16 for me. Yeah. He can add some value with his legs, which is going to save you, especially, again, when we get to that Bears game, same kind of thing. Like Josh Allen, Justin Fields, justifiable because they run. Watson can do that a little bit, but also he has 2 touchdowns in 3 games. Yeah. I mean, you're already worried about him. So I would be avoiding Deshaun Watson in these conditions for sure.
Are you avoiding Juwan Johnson, or is he going to score touchdowns?
Yeah, so he's an interesting one. He's 16th in my rankings. 7 touchdowns in his last 7 games. That's the stat you're going to hear a lot. But the week before, he had 0 catches. He had 67 yards last week. That was by far a season best. He's averaging even including last week, he's averaging 4.2 targets and 32 yards per game this season. So also Brown's really good against tight ends. Bad conditions.
Yep. I'd fade.
I'm not in yet. I'm not in on Johnson. The touchdowns, we've talked about it all the time. They're hard to predict, right? And he could easily just disappear and get you a 0. He really could get you a 0. He has that floor.
Yeah, he does. 2 weeks ago, he gave you that exact
Literally gave you a 0.
Floor, yeah.
And he's done that before this season.
All right, this is one that Field and I have been really excited about to talk with you. Texans at Titans.
You talk to me about it?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
excited to talk about all these games with you, Mike Clay.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow. These should be easy. These next 3 games should be quick.
Starting Derrick Henry, one of the reasons why Field and I were excited to talk with you about this is because yesterday Field, and part of the reason probably why it was one of the best rated shows that we've ever done.
Yes.
This is because Field laid out why Derrick Henry is definitely going to have 200 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns because of the last 4 games he's had against the Texans.
Yes.
But your projections don't have that.
Oh, yeah. That's weird, right?
Yeah.
I got to fix them. He's
Yeah.
still the
Should be over
RB1 by far.
Only 22.78. Yeah.
Why do you hate Derrick Henry this week?
I don't know. I hate him so much that he is locked into my DFS lineup.
That's-
which,
yes.
a little foreshadowing for CSS
That's
DFS.
right.
I'm in on Henry. I mean,
Derrick Henry's going to crush this week.
You can't look. There's no Ryan Tannehill too. I'm very much worried about them putting 13 guys in the box.
Yeah.
They're out on every play. He'll still probably get 180, but
Would that
Yeah,
be
I
a
mean-
better strategy for Houston, taking a 12 men on the field penalty every play as opposed to letting Derrick Henry
because then you're
run
just
the
giving
ball?
up 5 yards at a
Yeah,
time. instead of
5
him
yards.
running for
That
200.
might take that. But yes, he is the only lineup block because we have so
Yeah.
many injured players in this game. Ryan Tannehill seems very unlikely to play on Saturday. He might not play for the rest of the season, so you could get a bunch of Malik Willis time. Traylon Burks has returned to practice for Tennessee. Unclear whether he has fully cleared concussion protocol. We'll have an update either later today or on Friday. Brandon Cooks was a full participant in practice yesterday. To the extent that you care about that, he should be available on Saturday. Nico Collins continues to not practice for the Texans. Sounds like he might be iffy to play on Saturday as well. But it's really Derrick Henry in this game. Everybody else is just sort of like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, great receiver corner matchup here for Brandon Cooks and probably Chris Moore, assuming Nico Collins is still out. Titans most fantasy points to receivers, most to the perimeter.
Yeah.
Terrible in every quarter category. 2 of their top 3 corners have been out the last couple of weeks. Trey Avery and Christian Fulton, who's their number 1, obviously iffy for this week. So there could be some sleeper appeal there. Maybe if you feel good about them as flex options. Chris Moore has 19 targets the last 2 weeks. Now Cooks and Collins were out, but even if one of those 2 are out, which would be Collins, he's still going to see a lot of volume. So that's an option. But I will say this on the Tennessee side. When Malik Willis has made 2 starts already, he had 0 touchdowns and he attempted 26 passes. Yeah. I mean, there's games where quarterbacks attempt 50 passes in one game.
Through his
Total.
He totaled 26.
13
They were
oh my gosh.
extremely run heavy. That's a big difference from when Ryan Tannehill's under center. That's going to be the plan here as well. I'd be I don't think I have any receiver in the top 60 for Tennessee.
And that's part of the reason why, if you look at the tight end ranks, you have Chigo Okonkwo all the way down to 25.
Exactly
Who's been
the
really good
reason.
recently, but how can you play him?
That's exactly right. I had him around where you guys have him, like the 14 to 16 range. Once I pulled back on how much they're going to throw the ball, he just plummets. So you can't trust him in this circumstance.
Yikes. All right. That's tough. Let's move ahead. Last one here. Giants at
2
Vikings.
games, but the last one's a very quick
sorry,
one
I
as well.
did.
A lot of lineup blocks. Yeah.
That's all lineup blocks.
Giants at Vikings. Lineup blocks include Saquon, Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, and TJ Hawkinson. You know what I love about this game? It's played indoors.
Yes, love it. Absolutely love
All
it.
right.
I want
Load
to
up
play
on this game.
everybody from this game that I can that plays
Yeah.
indoors.
All this cold we're talking about this week. Minnesota's like, yeah, that's like a Wednesday in December.
You're
They're
starting
like minus 20. Yeah, sounds about right.
I feel like all of these Vikings you're starting, and I'm looking at both of these quarterbacks, and with the way that we have some of these other quarterbacks that have plummeted, both Kirk Cousins and Daniel Jones, I think are positioned to potentially be starters. Mike, do you want to let's start with Daniel Jones. We'll start with the Giants.
Yeah, by the way, if you're thinking about these guys against like a Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson, you're going this direction.
That's
right?
exactly where
You're
you're going.
going
Yeah, if you have
indoors.
the opportunity. Yeah.
For sure, you said Daniel Jones first?
Let's start with Daniel Jones, yeah.
17 or more fantasy points, 4 of his last 6, and we like the matchup. The Vikings have allowed at least 17 fantasy points to the opposing quarterback in 5 of their last 6. Jones adds value with his legs. We know that. He's been scoring at least occasionally through the air. As of late, not great receivers, obviously, but he's doing enough. He's doing enough for us to rank him in the top 10.
Sure is. I have him as quarterback 10 on my board, so I'm right there as well. And then Kirk Cousins, quarterback 8 for me. You know the volume is going to be there. He's had at least 30 completions in 3 of his past 4 games. Now, some of that's a bit quirky because they had the absolutely ridiculous game script last week, but this team has this team is just a good, efficient offense for the most part. 30-plus completions could definitely happen in a game in which they're not down by 33 points at halftime. So I've got Cousins as quarterback 8. The Giants continue to be without probably their best cornerback in Adoree Jackson, who's missed several games in a row right now. So if they can protect Kirk Cousins, he should have a good game.
If we like this matchup against the Vikings secondary for Daniel Jones, which one of these pass catchers in Darius Slayton or Isaiah Hodges or Richie James are you potentially trusting if you need to throw a dart this week, Mike?
It's Slayton. I'm going to stick with him. He did have 7 targets last week. I know it was a down game for the second week in a row. I was a little nervous about talking him back up last week coming off the Eagles game because Washington has been a lot better against receivers, and that did show up in the box score. But this is different, right? The Vikings aren't like playing better. They're atrocious against receivers. Most catches allowed to the position, the second most fantasy points, second most to the perimeter, which is where Slayton usually aligns. They're worse than both of those categories the last 8 weeks. They cannot stop wide receivers this season. So Slayton's 32nd on my board. And again, when you start factoring in weather, he looks even better. I think Mike, that you can make a case to start him.
This is the perfect crystallization of the fantasy dilemma of this weekend. Someone reached out to me before the show and wants to know, do they bench Amari Cooper in favor of Darius Slayton? And
it's close. I have them close in the ranks.
And separate and apart from the two players involved, it is clearly superior player playing in absolutely dreadful elements with a quarterback who is not Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen versus the inferior overall player, but still a capable one, with a quarterback who is also not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, playing with absolutely no weather concerns whatsoever. It's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. It's one of those where, like, if I had to estimate the average number of fantasy points that they score, maybe Amari Cooper scores like 1.5 on average, but if they played 100 times, Darius Slayton outscores him 40 out of the 100 times or 45 out of the 100 times. It is the perfect encapsulation of this fantasy dilemma.
And you know what I do in that situation? I would wait till Saturday. Right? I'd wait till Saturday. I would see the latest forecast. If it's horrific, I'm going Slayton. He's indoors at least. And he's been,
I'm the same way.
6 of his last 8 games, he's been fine. The 6 weeks prior to the last 2, he was wide receiver 25, right? Which probably isn't far off where Cooper was, especially lately.
Cooper hasn't been lighting the world on fire either, right? This is not like you're trying to decide, like, hey, do I sit DeAndre Hopkins? It's like, dude, D-Hop's going to get you 12 targets no matter what.
So I would say, look, if we get to Saturday and it's just like, you know what, the wind isn't that bad in Cleveland, it's going to be like 10 to 15 miles an hour instead of 40, then I'm like, all right, I'll just go Cooper. But if it is going to be like tonight's forecast and it's 35, 40 mile an hour gusts, which is probably going to be, I'm going Darius Slayton.
What about on the other side of that? Adam Thielen, potential, is he still getting enough volume to be in that consideration this week with all that wintry mix we're having?
I'm gonna use him. I have him 34th, but again, as we continue to adjust for the weather, I'm feeling better and better and better about him. Great matchup. I expect Fabian Moreau to shadow Justin Jefferson. He's been shadowing the past couple of weeks in place of Adoree Jackson, who's still out. Nick McLeod on the other side is struggling. He was on Jahan Dotson last week throughout most of that game, and Jahan Dotson had a great game, just had no trouble getting by him, over 100 yards in the game. Giants, with all the personnel issues, 6th most fantasy points to receivers over the last 8 weeks, are struggling. It's a good matchup for Thielen. He looks like a good flex wide receiver 3, maybe a wide receiver 2 when all is said and done here.
Really quickly, that was in your wide receiver cornerback matchup article, which is available on ESPN Plus. Is that right, Mike?
It is. The Shadow Report is out there, and the one thing I adjust throughout the week is the cheat sheet, right? So as we get more information on injuries and stuff, I kind of update that a few times leading up to the game. So that's all there.
All right. Check out ESPN Plus for not just Field Pass, which is everything that we talk about here, Field, but also some of the stuff that Mike's does.
Let's do it.
Last game. Sorry, I jumped the gun on this one.
No, this is a fairly straightforward game, right? You usually kind of know what you're getting at.
Lineup blocks, right? And then we're done.
Yeah, pretty much.
Lineup blocks for Bengals at Patriots include Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Ramondre Stevenson. Only injuries that we have here on this list, Field, Damian Harris, obviously.
Yep, sounds like he's got a chance to play on Saturday, but what do we know? Ramondre Stevenson just rules, so good, right? He's so good. We were talking about it a couple of days ago, like, he didn't even catch. He had -4 receiving yards and absolutely smashed last weekend. So, and Hayden Hurst, who said he expects to play, another one of those tight ends. We'll see whether he does give it a go. Obviously, you'll know by 11:30 on Saturday morning. Hayden Hurst says, though, he expects to be back on the field. I don't think that really impacts any Bengals pass catcher, though. They kind of are what they are. Joe Mixon, you just want better volume. That's all from Joe Mixon. You want more volume and more snaps. We'll see whether he gets it on Saturday against the Patriots.
Are you starting any of these Patriots pass catchers? Jacoby Myers is the only one that we have even considered.
But he's fallen off.
Yeah, big way.
The Patriot passing offense is just dreadful right now.
Yep.
Can't get anything going. They have yet to throw a fourth quarter passing touchdown. The only team in the league that has not done that, which is a remarkable stat for all the wrong reasons. So it's Ramondre Stevenson. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just not under 7 targets and 5 straight for Jacoby Myers. He was living on seeing 8, 9, 10, 11 targets. That has disappeared. So he's 39th on my board, and it's going to be cold there, too.
It's going to be cold. Weather's not quite as daunting there, but remember, that's a stadium that, especially right now, they're doing construction. Like, wind is always a big factor in that stadium because they got this big open side. They have one side where it's closed, and it's usually pretty easy to kick into, but they've got it's one of the few stadiums that has an open side to it, which that basically just invites wind into the stadium. So
Can I ask one quick question
well.
before we move on from all of this?
Sure. Yeah.
When you're looking at defenses for this week, do you look at defenses in these games where it's like it's going to be awful weather, so you expect lower points scored? Go out there and try and grab those defenses.
100%. And when I adjusted those 2 games, and I'll adjust Jets Jacksonville when I get back to my computer. Those defenses moved up in the projections pretty high, and you'll see that that's baked in my ranks and projections. There's that, and there's also a lot of backup quarterbacks in there too. So that's another reason to upgrade some defenses this week. We're in that season, right? The final few weeks, a lot of backup quarterbacks. So
we want kickers indoors. We want defenses in bad weather games.
Yep,
that's bad weather against guys, bad quarterbacks, right?
We're going to talk to Adam Schefter in just a second, but first, Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save some money on insurance?
Let's do it.
Of course you would. And when it comes to great rates on insurance, Geico can help, like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners or renters coverage. Plus, add an easy-to-use mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And Geico is an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com or contact your local agent today. And with that, we say happy belated birthday to Adam Schefter. Schefter, how was your birthday yesterday?
Not bad, Field. We're another year older, so we'll just keep marching along. We're Lawrence Taylor now. That's the way it goes.
Oh, that's a great year then. Lawrence Taylor, the greatest defensive player in league history, at least in my estimation. And Shefty, you're wiser. You're more athletic. We saw the Lambeau Leap on Monday night.
Yes,
a successful Lambeau Leap at that. I'm going to start, Shefty, with what I think is the story of the week, not just in fantasy, but in the real football world as well, which is Jalen Hurts. You tweeted not long ago an update on Jalen Hurts. What's the latest for this week? And then what might be the latest going forward for Jalen Hurts?
Listen, this morning, Nick Sirianni, the Eagles head coach, said he expects that Jalen Hurts will not play and Gardner Minshew will be the starter on Saturday night. And I think this is the way it was going to go all week long. If you just look at it, Field, they have to win 1 of 3 remaining games to clinch the number 1 seed. Not only do they have to win just 1, but the next 2 weeks are at home. So they have 2 home games. So if you can't win 1 home game to clinch the number 1 seed, then something's wrong. And I think that this is playing with house money this weekend with Gardner Minshew, who's a gamer, who will come out firing, who will come out and play pretty well, I expect. But then they have 2 home games, the Saints, and I think it's the Giants in the last week. And at that point in time, they've got to win one of those games. So you buy Jalen Hurts another week right now to get ready, to get healthy. And then if he's able to play next week, which we'll see, we don't know right now, then he comes back then. In worst case scenario, if Gardner Minshew plays the next 2 weeks and they don't win either, and all their opponents win everything they're supposed to, and you have to win the last game, well, then Jalen Hurts can step in the last home game of the season against the Giants and try to win that one for home field advantage.
Maybe I'm trying to reverse engineer it because I would certainly love to have Jalen Hurts in my lineup right now, but I'm preparing mentally for the possibility of him not being available until week 18 at the earliest, just because of all the things you just laid out. Like, let's apply some common sense to the situation. Let's go to Arizona, Shefty. They play Christmas night. They play host to the Buccaneers. One of the few games where we don't have to worry about weather this week, which is glorious, but we do have a new quarterback. What is the latest on Arizona's depth chart under center?
Well, Colt McCoy is going to be out, and so Trace McSorley is going to start. They're down to their 3rd-string quarterback. I was actually thinking about this morning. How many teams do you know that could be down to their 3rd-string quarterback and still be in contention for the number 2 seed in the NFC, which is an ode to the job that the 49ers have done this season with Brock Purdy stepping in, playing the last 3 games, and them still reeling off all these wins and being in first place in the NFC West. The Cardinals are now down to their 3rd-string quarterback, like the 49ers are, and it just feels a little bit more desperate. We don't know what we're going to get. Trace McSorley is a quarterback that runs around, makes things happen. I don't know that the passing game is going to thrive the way it would have if Kyler Murray or Colt McCoy were out there. So if you have a Cardinals receiver like DeAndre Hopkins or Marquise Brown, I don't know that you can realistically expect the type of production that you would have with one of those other two quarterbacks. But it's a different type of attack, and Trace McSorley is going to be the starting quarterback against Tom Brady and the Bucs this weekend.
Yeah, Tom Brady versus Trace McSorley. That sounds like a Christmas miracle in terms of starting quarterbacks in a matchup, Shefty. You mentioned we got a lot of teams down to their third-string quarterback. Not sure we'll get there, but at least the Baltimore Ravens are dealing with injuries to their top two quarterbacks. So Lamar Jackson hasn't practiced yet. Do we think we'll see Lamar today on the practice field or playing on Saturday? Because back-to-back misses makes me think like we could see yet another week of no Lamar.
And that's the guess and the expectation and the sense right now, no Lamar for another week. Now, this was the week that I believe that they were hoping, they thought he would be able to come back, but obviously it's a PCL, that's a major injury, and it's not easy to bounce back from that. And so right now, yesterday Tyler Huntley was limited with the shoulder injury. I think he'll be all right for Saturday, and I think Tyler Huntley will wind up quarterbacking this team over the weekend. I think he'll be the guy that steps in there, and they won't have to use Anthony Brown. Some people wondering that yesterday, but it looks like Tyler Huntley right now is tracking to be available. I don't think we get Lamar this weekend, and so maybe they can get him back for the final 2 weeks. That would be the hope within the organization.
And then one more piece of quarterback news, Shefty, not because of injury, but the Colts have a new starting quarterback as well. What's going on there in Indy?
Listen, I remember midway through the season, you forget that Nick Foles is even on the roster. It's like, Nick Foles, he's been there the whole time. Like they're going with Matt Ryan and Sam Ehlinger, and what about Nick Foles, who's got a decorated resume? But I think they're looking for some kind of spark. They're an extreme long shot to make the postseason here. I think they're looking for that little jolt on Monday night against the Los Angeles Chargers, and I think everybody remembers the way that last week went for Indianapolis, and they're just thinking, you know what, maybe St. Nick can lead another Christmas miracle here and get the Colts to the playoffs somehow if they could find a way to win their last 3 games, get help. As unlikely as it is, we've seen Nick Foles do unlikely things on the football field, and I think that they think it's going to ignite their passing game a little bit, which should open up the running game, which is minus Jonathan Taylor for the remainder of the season. So, look, they're just trying to experiment and try different things because there's no Jonathan Taylor, and this season has not gone the way that many people in Indianapolis had thought or hoped.
Yeah, and there's really nowhere to go but up. With Matt Ryan, a world-class human and an NFL MVP and decorated that beyond description, maybe a Pro Football Hall of Famer one day. It hasn't been great. It wasn't great last week against Minnesota in a matchup in which you should have been able to move the football. They could not. They got their work done basically on defense and special teams. So, Shefty, all that stuff was great. Love talking football with you. Always do every single week. But I'm here to talk about the real business. And before I can talk about that, it's not too late to play fantasy basketball this season. You'll start fresh with a 0-0 record. You can play for free by creating your own league, or you can join an ESPN Plus league. Go to ESPN.com/fantasy basketball to sign up. You, the man who knows more about football and has more connections than anybody else in the entire world, is in love with fantasy basketball. What drew you to and what keeps you so enchanted by fantasy basketball?
Well, I think it's every night. And, baseball seems like it's so long. And not to take away from anything from fantasy baseball, which I've never played, and I don't think I could do that because that would completely destroy my life. But fantasy basketball is just my diversion at night. It's just my little escape. Everybody's got a little hobby that they turn to. And that, I don't know, over the last 5 or 6 years is something that I have really developed a passion for, feel very strongly about NBA fantasy basketball, love it. It's a lot of fun. It's, it's like following the stock market or certain stocks, like certain players are going up and down. Yeah. You could see when a guy's about to take off. You could see when a guy is tanking. A lot of injury news in the NBA. These guys often sit out games, and that necessitates more lineup changes. And we've had our NBA War Room League here for, 4 or 5 years, Field, roughly? Yeah. And it's been a lot of fun. Love doing it. And it's become, I guess, my hobby, so to speak.
We are closing in on 2 million signups on ESPN for fantasy basketball. We'd love to see that number. Love to see us breeze past that number, Shefty. I think one of the things that people maybe are hesitant on, or why they might not have played fantasy basketball as of yet, is like they think to themselves, football's nice because you kind of have to worry about it like 3 or 4 times during the week, right? You do your lineups on Thursday, maybe again on Sunday, last-minute alterations either during the day on Sunday, maybe Monday Night Football, and waivers, right? But is basketball too much work? Like, what can people reasonably expect in terms of managing a team during the day?
Well, you could put as much into it as you want. I feel like I put a lot into it. I'm tracking the guys on a nightly basis. You don't have to do that. You could kind of step back and set your lineup and move forward. Let me just say this. If you like fantasy football, I cannot endorse fantasy basketball any more than I can right here. It's glorious. I love it. And I feel like just like fantasy football has driven the popularity of football, I think fantasy basketball is doing some of that to basketball and will continue to grow and grow and grow as more and more people discover it. But again, love it, can't endorse it more, can't recommend enough people to try it. And I think they'll be very happy that they did.
On Fantasy Football Now on Sundays, Jeff Darlington, while his team was still alive, found a way to basically just talk smack to whoever he was playing against. Unsolicited, Shefty, would you like the opportunity as your 8-1 per sources team is now facing off against, I think, Matt Harrington this week, right? Do you want to trash talk Matt Harrington right now, or do you want to bypass?
My team is beaten and battered. I've got 3 guys in IR. I got other guys missing games. I'm not happy with it. It's been very disappointing. I need some guys to get healthy. So I don't want to trash talk Matt Harrington. What I do want to do is I want to send a personal plea out to Tyrese Maxey. We need you back. Okay. I want to send a personal plea out to Andrew Wiggins. We need you back. I want to send a personal plea out to Cam Johnson. We need you back. I want to send a personal plea out to Terry Rozier. Wow. We need you back. Like, my guys are, they're hurting. And it's been like this for a few weeks. And when you got your 3 IR spots all filled up with guys and you've got no flexibility, it's frustrating. That's tough, Field. That's not my idea of a happy holiday.
Yeah, it is not, but it is still a wonderful activity, fantasy basketball is, and it gets you through. Like, what I like about fantasy basketball is that, it is your little fantasy, it's your cup of coffee for fantasy that extends beyond the football season. But if you're somebody who likes to enjoy your summer, it's an April, mid-April deadline. Like, you got it for the next 3-4 months, where if you live in a climate like you and I both do, Shefty, it's going to be cold. You're going to have a lot of snow. Not like you're going very far that often, right? You got 3.5 months about 3 months after the football season is over to focus in on your fantasy basketball squads. It is a blast. It's also been a great way to become even closer with some of our great ESPN colleagues here. And Shefty, your team is downright dynastic. Best of luck to Per Sources the rest of the way. And we'll talk to you again on Saturday, Shefty, for Fantasy Football Now. You'll have the latest on a bunch of key injuries and probably a weather report. Put on your Ginger Z hat on Saturday morning, Shefty.
Oh, it's going to be cold. It's going to be wet tonight in New York for the Jaguars and the Cowboys. I've got one playoff decision I'd like to open up to the panel. I got 2 decisions on a football consolation team. I've got 2 defenses, the Cowboys and the Jaguars.
Okay.
I've ridden the Cowboys all year long. They've been pretty good to me, although they've struggled lately. And I think they're due for a big game, by the way, this weekend, because they were getting criticized and questioned. They blew a big lead last week. It just feels like a Cowboys game. Except tonight in New York, it's going to be rainy. It's going to be cold. It's a short week. Like, would you go Jaguars over Cowboys, or would you go Cowboys over Jaguars? And then I have one other question after that. I just want to hear what everybody says there.
All right. I'll go Jaguars. Okay. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a close one. I'm just worried, if they're not throwing, are they going to generate turnovers in this game?
Maybe. It's supposed to be so wet. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
But they're just going to be running the ball between the tackles.
Okay.
Not many points allowed. Maybe not no chance of a touchdown. I'd probably stick with Dallas.
Okay, so Daniel breaks a tie.
I think I would go with Dallas against Gardner Minshew.
All right, 2-1. I got to
Here's the thing. I'd like to go with Jacksonville. I really would. But I'm going to hate myself for picking up a defense 2 weeks ago, playing it over the defense that got me here. Yeah. Not that I got very far, but that's the defense that I've kind of dated all year long. Last one flex spot. Got a lot of guys that I'm debating in a full point PPR. Ready? Right now the guy I got in there is Gus Edwards, because I think Baltimore's going to run the ball a lot this week.
Yep.
I also have Chris Moore, but Brandon Cooks is back. I also have Deion Jackson. I also have Chuba Hubbard. One guy in that spot. Who would you put?
My instincts go right to Chris Moore.
Yeah, mine was Chris Moore too. Yeah, Chris Moore, where it's going to be cold, but not like crazy windy or wet in Nashville on Saturday, Shefty. Great matchup too, especially if Nico Collins remains out, which he hasn't practiced yet this week.
Yeah, he won't play, but Brandon Cooks will. So I don't know. Here's the thing. Here's what I come back to. who's going to get more touches of that group? And I think
Definitely
Gus Edwards
Gus,
of that group is going to get the most touches.
Yeah.
And so
I think
that
there's
gives
more
you the best
upside
chance.
with Chris Moore because like Chris Moore can go 5 for 60 and outscore Gus Edwards, who could have like 19 carries for 73 yards and 0 targets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have Dobbins there, you have Justice Hill, and by the way, Carolina's playing your Lions.
Yes,
So
you're
you
not
don't
playing
want to mess
Chuba
with that.
Hubbard.
I mean,
Yeah.
the
Chuba
Lions,
Hubbard, yeah.
Adam, the Lions haven't allowed 10 fantasy points to a running back in 8 weeks.
8
I think
weeks.
it was.
Weeks
I mean,
since
dominating,
Wow. Yeah.
dominating running backs, and he's
So
sharing the
that
backfield.
knocks out Chuba. That knocks out Chuba. I'm going to tell you right now, Gus Edwards is going to score a touchdown this week. I'm just telling you.
Hey,
Right now.
all right.
Ooh,
All
just
right.
got
I
a
think
red
you
zone
made your
question
decision.
surrounding that.
I
Yeah,
think I
you
made a decision.
If you feel that
No,
strongly about a
I have
touchdown,
not.
I
I
bet
have
it
not
is.
made. I have not made the decision. And by the way, the reason I'm in the consolation round and not the playoffs is because I played Gus Edwards over DeAndre Swift in the week where Swift's usage suddenly climbed to 51%, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? After watching this all year long, where he's getting 8-10 snaps.
It is fantasy is a cruel mistress, Shefty. That much is for sure. All right, well, we'll get an update on Saturday. We'll circle back and see where
Yeah.
I need
you
to hear.
landed on these, whether you decided to play the Jaguars tonight or not, and whether or not you're going to go with Gus Edwards come Saturday. But we always appreciate you joining us here on Fantasy Focus, Shefty. We'll talk to you again in a couple of days. Hope it was a great birthday, and thanks as always for making time for us.
Happy holidays, guys. We'll be in touch Saturday. Until then, Merry Christmas to all.
Thank you so
Merry
much,
Christmas.
Shefty. Always love having Shefty on the show. Can't
Oh,
wait to see
always.
on Saturday which direction
So
it
great.
goes.
I've never
Long
done
shots
this.
are getting fun too, right?
I've never done a Saturday fantasy football now before. This is going to be my
Oh,
first
yeah.
one.
This is, I think, only my second one. I think it's only the second one in the past 15 years. We had one way back in. It's always the calendar, right? If the
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
NFL games are on Sunday, we do it on Saturdays.
That'll be exciting.
Be great. Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for Thursday.
Fun show.
We're
Yeah.
going to be back tomorrow. We
definitely.
still have more
Three
games.
of us again. Yeah. Rest of our previews.
Rest of our previews. We got a few more Saturday games, and then the rest of our Sunday and our Monday game.
Let's go. Can't wait.
That's
Let's
it.
do it.
Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We love you. Don't forget to love each other. Please be kind to yourself, and we can't wait to see you guys on Friday. Good luck tonight in this Thursday Night Football matchup. Fingers crossed.
Go Jags. Let's go.
Go Jags.
10-3.
I
need
thought I had
them
the
to-
Jets. No, go Jets.
Oh yeah, you did at the Jags.
Yeah.
Remember in the preseason, I was like, pick the Jags as my deep sleeper, and
Yep.
you and Mina and Woody just totally jumped on my case for 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, and just laughed at me the
Yeah,
whole time.
pretty good.
Go
Yeah.
Jags. Let's go.
Yeah, that was fun.
Playoffs.
Playoffs?